And that brings us to the golden arrow of consumption. This is the heart of the system, the engine that drives it. It is so important that protecting this arrow has become the top priority for both of these guys. That's why after 9/11, when our country was in shock, and President Bush could have suggested any number of appropriate things, to grieve, to pray, to hope. No, he said to shop, to shop.
Bush didn't ask us to pray or grieve after 9/11?
Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve.
And yes, George Bush did tell us to shop. It was very good advice. Israel, who deals with many more suicide bombs than America ever has, tells their citizens to go back to the markets and go back to the restaurants that were bombed to prove to the terrorists that the terrorists can never take over their way of life.
We have become a nation of consumers. Our primary identity has become that of being consumers, not mothers, teachers, farmers, but consumers.
200 years ago, America was a third world nation. Now America is the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. And yes, now its citizens are able to obtain consumer goods that increase their citizens' standard of living.
The primary way that our value is measured and demonstrated is by how much we contribute to this arrow, how much we consume. And do we? We shop and shop and shop, keep the materials flowing, and flow they do. Guess what percentage of total materials flow through this system is still in product or use 6 months after their date of sale in North America? 6 months after their date of sale in North America.
How on earth did somebody calculate that number? Did that person take a random sample of the American people and then ask them how much of everything they own do they keep after 6 months, and then how much on all the products in the world are kept on the shelves? Whatever number we're going to hear from her, it's going to be a made-up number.
50%? 20? No. 1%. 1. In other words, 99% of the stuff we harvest, mine, process, transport, 99% of the stuff we run through this system is trashed within 6 months.
Okay, I went to footnote 44 to find out where she got that statistic. It's from Paul Hawken, Natural Capitalism, and Paul Hawken was really only talking about energy efficiency. And he really doesn't have a basis for how they got that information. He's only talking about 1% of, I guess, energy is kept in our materials flow, which that doesn't even mean anything. It's like a made-up statistic. In fact, she even writes, this statement is not, I repeat, not saying that 99% of the stuff we buy is trash.
6 months after their date of sale in North America.
And writes, this statement is not, I repeat, not saying that 99% of the stuff we buy is trashed. Think beyond your household to the upstream waste created in the extraction, production, packaging, transportation, and selling of all the stuff you bought. For example, the No Dirty Gold campaign explains that there is nearly 2 million tons of mining waste for every 1 ton of gold produced. That translates into about 20 tons of mine waste created to make 1 gold wedding ring. Let's assume for the sake of argument that that is true. So what? We are not running out of landfills, and there's no indication here some of that might be recycled. So this whole nonsense with that 1% that we use in 6 months, it's a meaningless statistic.
Now, how can we run a planet with that level of materials throughput?
Well, one, the calculations for the number is absolutely ridiculous, and number two, even if the numbers were true, it would have no effect on us.
It wasn't always like this. The average U.S. person now consumes twice as much as they did 50 years ago. Ask your grandma. In her day, stewardship and resourcefulness and thrift were valued.
My grandma lived through the Great Depression. She was thrifty because she was broke. We consume a lot more now because we're a wealthier nation. And yes, there is a legitimate argument to say that maybe right now is a time where we should save and produce more rather than just consume, but she's not arguing that. She's saying that we should actually consume less and produce less.
So how did this happen? Well, it didn't just happen. It was designed.
I'd love to find the central planners in a free market society.
Shortly after World War II, these guys were figuring out how to ramp up the economy. Retailing analyst Victor Lebeau articulated the solution that's become the norm for the whole system. He said, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate.
I've heard everything. One guy planned the entire free market economy for the entire United States.
President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisors chairman said that the American economy's ultimate purpose is to produce more consumer goods.
We took our entire male population and basically sent them overseas to fight in World War II, and then when they came back, we had no consumer goods because they weren't needed when the men weren't there. So then when the men came home, yes, it was a very important goal to change from producing war goods to consumer goods.
More consumer goods? Our ultimate purpose? Not provide health care or education or safe transportation or sustainability or justice? Consumer goods?
What on earth is she talking about? President Eisenhower signed in the Civil Rights Act of 1957, the Civil Rights Act of 1960, and he sent the National Guard to Little Rock, Arkansas to ensure that black kids could go to school. But I'm sorry that Dwight D. Eisenhower didn't call for sustainability. Even so, only capitalism is sustainable. She's acting like the government should do everything.
How did they get us to jump on board this program so enthusiastically?
Again, our economy is not centrally planned. There is no they.
Well, two of their most effective strategies are planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is another word for designed for the dump. It means they actually make stuff to be useless as quickly as possible, so we'll chuck it and buy a new one.
If people really wanted their products to last forever, they'd just pay a ton of money for it. But they'd rather buy affordable goods and wait for technology to improve. But competition ensures that everybody can get the product that they want. But even so, according to footnote 48, it proves that she made up the definition of planned obsolescence. It has nothing to do with meaning designed for the dumps. All it means is it's defined as instilling in the buyer the desire to own something a little newer, a little better, a little sooner than is necessary. All that means is it wanted people to look for newer technology, period.
It's obvious with things like plastic bags and coffee cups, but now it's even big stuff. Mops, DVDs, cameras, barbecues even, everything. Even computers. Have you noticed that when you buy a computer now, the technology is changing so fast that in just a couple of years, it's actually an impediment to communication? I was curious about this, so I opened up a big desktop computer to see what was inside. And I found out that the piece that changes each year is just a tiny little piece in the corner. But you can't just change that one piece because each new version is a different shape. So you gotta chuck the whole thing and buy a new one.
Wow, that should be taught in the computer class. Evidently she doesn't know about different operating systems or the type of RAM that you can buy or the speed of your hard drive, or you could replace the motherboard. But most people don't have that type of technical expertise, and they'd rather buy a computer rather than doing it themselves.
So I was reading industrial design journals from the 1950s when planned obsolescence was really catching on. These designers are so open about it. They actually discuss how fast can they make stuff break that still leaves the consumer having enough faith in the product to go out and buy another one. It was so intentional.
Yes, it's called weighing the costs. Would people really buy an everlasting gobstopper if it cost $1 billion?
But stuff cannot break fast enough to keep this arrow afloat. So there's also perceived obsolescence. Now, perceived obsolescence convinces us to throw away stuff that is still perfectly useful. How do they do that? Well, they change the way the stuff looks. So if you bought your stuff a couple of years ago, everyone can tell that you haven't contributed to this arrow recently. And since the way we demonstrate our value is contributing to this arrow, it can be embarrassing.
We live in a free society. Only the government can force people to buy something they don't really want.
Like, I've had the same fat white computer monitor on my desk for 5 years. My coworker just got a new computer. She has a flat, shiny, sleek monitor. It matches her computer, it matches her phone, even her pen stand. She looks like she's driving in Spaceship Central, and I look like I've got a washing machine on my desk. Fashion is another prime example of this. Have you ever wondered why women's shoe heels go from fat one year to skinny the next to fat to skinny? It's not because there's some debate about which heel structure is the most healthy for women's feet. It's because wearing fat heels in a skinny heel year shows everybody that you haven't contributed to that arrow as recently, so you're not as valuable as that person in skinny heels next to you, or more likely in some ad. It's to keep us buying new shoes.
I've never seen anything so ridiculous. That's just a demonstration that our capitalist society is working. In the Soviet Union, you didn't have any choices. You only had one choice, and that was what the government gave you. In America, we have millions of choices for every type of product you can possibly imagine, and that makes our society great.
Advertisements and media in general plays a big role in this. Each of us in the U.S. is targeted with over 3,000 advertisements a day. We see more advertisements in 1 year than people 50 years ago saw in a lifetime.
I hope so. 50 years ago, people only had 3 channels on their television, if they even owned a television.
And if you think about it, what's the point of an ad except to make us unhappy with what we have?
The point of an advertisement is to make the citizenry aware of the goods and services in society. What good would a life-saving drug be if nobody knew about it? That's why drugs are advertised to the market, so doctors and the citizens can find out that the drug actually exists to save lives.
So 3,000 times a day, we're told our hair is wrong, our skin is wrong, our clothes are wrong, our furniture is wrong, our car is wrong, we are wrong, but it can all be made right if we just go shopping.
So if you believe that, then don't shop. No one's forcing you to shop.
Media also helps by hiding all of this and all of this. So the only part of the materials economy we see is the shopping. The extraction, production, and disposal all happens outside of our field of vision.